When a lion gets involved in an unexpected accident, a man rescues it from a cliff. What happens next is chilling. Thomas had always been the kind of person who helped anyone or anything. His childhood dream was to become a park ranger, so the day he got the job was one of the happiest days of his life. He quickly became not only a fervent defender of the animals and the environment he worked in, but also a loyal friend to his colleagues. The national park was his life, and he often stayed beyond his shift, finishing tasks or offering support and advice to his friends. Seeing the animals protected and safe warmed Thomas's heart, but he knew they still needed to live as they would in nature. This meant that sometimes it was difficult for Thomas to watch and let nature take its course. He understood the importance of not intervening in most situations, but sometimes he wished he could help more. The animals could not become dependent on humans if their populations were to increase in the wild. They needed to live a natural life. The park only offered protection from poachers. If someone asked him, it would be hard to choose his favorite part of the job because he truly loved it all. However, one thing always seemed special to him: watching the lions. It was an honor to be able to see them up close so regularly. In the early hours of the morning, it was possible to hear them roar and see them more active before the heat became unbearable. At sunset, he could spend hours watching them under the last rays of the sun. One morning, Thomas set out in his Jeep to do a park inspection, ensuring everything was in order. The park was so vast that rangers generally had a specific area to inspect. Today, to his delight, Thomas was in the cliffs, where one of the largest lion prides lived. They loved the mix of rocks and ledges where they could jump or lie down. Despite having worked at this job for a while, there was always something extraordinary about seeing a lion at the top of the cliff, watching over its lands. But that area was also quite dangerous, especially for adolescent lions who didn't yet have enough experience to understand the hazards. Although Thomas had never seen this personally, he had heard stories from older rangers about lions getting into trouble on the cliffs. He knew that the extremely dry weather they were facing didn't help. With the intense heat, the ground frequently cracked, and pieces of the cliff could crumble easily. Checking his watch, he saw that he still had a few minutes. That meant he could stay a bit longer to watch the lions before continuing with his tasks. With the sun rising over the cliffs, he noticed some lions waking up near the top. This pride had some adolescents, and Thomas was glad to see that they were not alone on the cliffs. At that moment, there was no other place in the world he would rather be. Then suddenly, something happened that turned his moment of peace and joy into a nightmare. Some of the young lions were playing near the edge when Thomas noticed rocks crumbling and falling. The movement further disturbed the already unstable edge of the cliff, and Thomas watched in horror as a lion slipped off the edge. The lion managed to grab on, but if they didn't act quickly, it would follow the rocks that continued to fall. Thomas grabbed his radio and immediately called for help, explaining the situation. He knew he couldn't just let nature take its course this time. He needed to save that lion. Thomas knew that reinforcements were on the way, but he couldn't lose a second. Taking the ropes from the Jeep, he cautiously moved toward the cliff. As he finished extending the ropes, he heard other Jeeps approaching, more rangers running to help. Tying the ropes to the lion, they counted to 3 and pulled with all their might. Finally, to the young rangers' delight, their effort paid off, and the lion was rescued back to the top of the cliff. As the other rangers stepped back, Thomas looked at the lion as if there was a mutual understanding between them. Thomas had saved its life. The other rangers watched in amazement, but this wouldn't be the last encounter between Thomas and the lion. Months passed, and the weather in the park began to change with the arrival of the rainy season. Thomas was doing his job when he spotted what seemed to be a fallen tree in the distance. As he approached the tree, suddenly a rumble echoed, causing the ground to shake beneath his feet. Thomas looked around and realized that a wave of mud and debris was rapidly approaching, a landslide. When the thick mud hit him, he clung to the tree to avoid being swept away. As the mud flow subsided, a feeling of relief washed over him as he realized he could still breathe. However, he knew he needed to be found soon. Otherwise, that small space wouldn't mean anything. His body was heavy with thick mud, making any movement impossible until he felt something moving through the mud above. As time passed, he realized he was hearing more sounds, as if the mud was being gradually removed, and he was slowly regaining his freedom. He heard a roar and realized a lion was nearby. Suddenly, Thomas looked up and saw his fellow rangers. They had found him and were digging in the mud. As he was pulled out of the mud, Thomas saw in the distance a tired lion covered in mud, and he instantly knew he was once again face to face with the lion he had saved on the cliff. One of the rangers wrapped him in a blanket and guided him to a nearby jeep while he watched the lion disappear. The other rangers began to recount what had happened. The rangers said they heard the rumble of the landslide and waited until the situation calmed down to go out and inspect the damage. One of the team members saw a lion frantically digging in the mud. Thinking it was trying to rescue one of them, they went to help, and upon reaching the site, they realized it wasn't another lion trapped there but Thomas. The ranger could hardly believe it. He never imagined that the lion he saved from the cliff would one day return the favor. What did you think of this story? Leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.